Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Grace Presbyterian Church. My name is Mark Burnham. I'm the pastor here, and we're glad that you're here for our monthly concert. It's wonderful to have everyone, and what a great crowd. Wow, this is wonderful. Couple of housekeeping things, just reminders that if you need to use the restroom, there are two restrooms as you go out the door in the back there to the right. You'll find restrooms that direction. And also there is the concerts are free, but if you'd like to make a free will offering, there is a basket in the back. Hopefully you were able to find a program for today, and also the smaller sheet is a brochure about our upcoming concerts and some information about the church. And finally, I want to do one more thing. I got to reach in my pocket. One of these things, right? Aren't we all tied to those these days? Yes. If you haven't yet and don't want to embarrass yourself, please turn them off or put them on silent. After the concert, we will have some a fellowship time. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But we're very glad that you're here. Thank you for your support and for your attendance here today. And I want to now invite our musicians to come forward, and they're going to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the program. So again, thank you all for being here.
Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to have you with us, and we're really delighted to be playing for you today. I wanted to just say a couple words about the first piece we're going to be playing, which is the Sonata by Leonard Bernstein. This is a very early work of Bernstein's. In fact, it was the first published work of Bernstein. So after he graduated from Harvard in 1939, he spent his summers at Tanglewood. If you've ever been there in western Massachusetts, you know what I'm talking about. He was Sergei Koussevitzky's conducting assistant, and his composition teacher there was Paul Hindemith, a very famous composer. After the summer of 1941, he took a bus trip to Key West, Florida, to escape hay fever season. And there, he started working on this sonata. So in the second movement, you can hear these Latin jazz influences that he heard while he was there. They're actually a precursor to West Side Story. There's a section in the second movement that sounds like the Sharks and the Jets are gliding across the gym floor. If you squint your eyes, you can see them. There's also the beginning of the song Somewhere in the second movement, so listen for that. In other places, like the opening of the first movement, you'll hear harmonies and counterpoint similar to Paul Hindemith. In other points, there will be references to Aaron Copland's spacious textures. And of course, Copland was one of Bernstein's great friends and mentors. Bernstein was at the piano for the premiere of this piece in Boston in 1942. As I said, it was his first published work, and he was very proud of it, even though he did recognize a certain academic element about the first movement with his use of counterpoint and rhythm.
Oh, thank you. She's not only a singer, she's a stagehand as well. Thank you, Jumi. This next little section is music by Francis Poulenc. Francis Poulenc and 5 other composers started a trend in music around the 1920. They were sort of the rebel bad boys of the composition world. They called themselves Les Six, the Six, and they were sort of the brainchild of the weird composer Eric Satie and Jean Cocteau, who was a famous writer and filmmaker. And anyway, these guys decided to get together, and they were going to be anti-everything. They're going to be anti the Impressionist movement, which was going on at that point. So anti what they considered vague music and flowery and clouds and moon and all that stuff. So their emphasis was more on being more direct with the music, and they were very influenced by the new trends of jazz and cabaret, and they hung out with various people from anyone from Igor Stravinsky to Edith Piaf to Maurice Chevalier to Picasso so they were all this integration of the arts at that point in time. So these next two pieces, this first one is from 1917, and it's called Mouvement Perpetuel, or Perpetual Movement, and it gets its name from my left hand, which just is perpetually moving, and it is the same rhythmic pattern and melodic pattern over and over again. So the interest actually is in the right hand. So that is the first piece, and I sort of equate it to a walk by the Seine on a sunny day. And the second piece is called, from the early 20s, called Novelette. And it actually is not as typical of some of his other music because it's quite melodic, and it was very influenced by Robert Schumann. So the title Novelette was actually only used once before by Schumann. What is interesting about it is that Schumann's father was a bookseller. So there's the word novel or novelette. So I hope you enjoy these two pieces.
Okay, so that was the Poulenc appetizer, or I guess you might say appetizers, right? He was one of the many composers who had very little training in composition. He composed mainly from instinct and followed no structural or harmonic formulas. Perhaps this is why perhaps this is what allowed him to discover a wealth of gorgeous diatonic melodies in an era that had largely given up on tonality or melody. His melodies are a reflection of his character, which he himself described as a melancholic character which likes to laugh like all melancholic characters. Thus, this sonata overflows with sentimentality, witticisms, and boisterousness, sometimes practically all at the same time. Poulenc was scheduled to give the premiere of this sonata with Benny Goodman on clarinet, but he died suddenly in January of 1963, and Leonard Bernstein stepped in to play the piano part at its premiere at Carnegie Hall, 21 years after the debut of his first published work.
Hi. I guess I was anxious to come off and introduce my song. This is Schubert song called Shepherd on the Rock. And then he composed this in 1828. It was during his final month of his life. He died at the age of 31. Oh, such a young age, but he was very prolific composer, and he composed over 600 art songs. And this is one of his art songs, and composed for soprano and a clarinet. And then he had an opera soprano friend who requested him to compose something showy, her range and emotions. And so he composed this, but it's really challenging for soprano and also clarinet player. And then you will see this song is divided into 3 sections. I put the translation on the program at the bottom, and it has 1 to 3 different sections. And the first and the third section, he used the poem by Müller. And the second section, he used, but 2 different poems by Müller. And the second section was poems by Van Hagen. And so 3 different poems that he used, and then you will hear the distinctively difference between 3 sections. It's almost like putting 3 songs into 1. So even though it's 1 title, I'm kind of singing 3 songs. Hope you like it. Thank you.
I have, unlike my colleagues, scripted my comments about Darius Milhaud so that I don't forget anything that I think you would find interesting about him, including the fact that as part of his rich life, he had quite a long tenure on the faculty at Mills College. He was born in 1892, as you see on your program, in a small French village into a close-knit and cultured family of amateur musicians that had called this village home for 8 centuries. He was educated at the Paris Conservatory, where he was initially a violin major, before turning to composition. His early inspiration came from the music of Debussy and Mussorgsky. In 1916, his friend Paul Claudel, whose name we now know as a poet, was named the French ambassador to Brazil. He hired Milhaud to be his secretary. So new inspiration, musical inspiration, came to Milhaud through the atmosphere and the native music of Brazil. A Jewish man, he had traveled to the US where more musical inspiration waited, but in 1940 he moved to the States permanently to avoid persecution at the hands of Nazi occupiers. He eventually landed in Oakland and accepted the offer of a position on the music faculty at Mills College. His wife, Madeline, a valued creative partner, taught the French language and drama at the school. She was also his support through painful mobility issues, the result of rheumatoid arthritis. In fact, he used a wheelchair and often taught at home to avoid the college buildings that had difficult accessibility at that time. So in 1947, he accepted a position at his alma mater, Paris Conservatory. So for the last 30 years of his life, he alternated academic years between Mills College and the Paris Conservatory. As a music educator, he was responsible for shaping the musical voices of musicians such as Dave Brubeck, an East Bay native, if you didn't know, Hollywood musician Burt Bacharach, and classical composers William Bolcom, Philip Glass, and Steve Reich. I came across a story that sums up Milhaud's teaching style, a style that was much appreciated by his students because it encouraged each of their unique strengths and styles. So I quote, "Darius Milhaud once astonished a crowd at a composers forum workshop. A student composition had just been performed and it was time for the discussion. The poor student was barely fending off questions from a particularly vocal fellow composer who kept asking why he had done this and why he had done that, when there was a sudden commotion as Milhaud slowly raised himself out of a deep armchair. Silence fell as the students waited to hear a pronouncement from the master. 'Why not?' asked Milhaud and sat down. He left behind a huge catalog of music, 12 symphonies, 18 string quartets, 34 concerti, 15 operas, 19 ballets, 25 film scores, many songs, and many pieces for less traditional combinations of instruments such as this. He's known not only for the enormous output, but for the freedom with which he wrote and the connection to his Jewish cultural roots. He said, 'I have no aesthetic rules or philosophy or theories. I love to write music. I always write with pleasure. Otherwise, I just do not write at all.' So this suite for violin, clarinet, and piano is a charming work for which some of the musical material was reworked from the incidental music written in 1936 for the play Traveler Without Baggage by Jean Anouilh. It is one of the 30 plays for which he wrote incidental music. The first movement, Overture, as you can see, is sassy and brisk. The rumba rhythm shows the influence of his time in Brazil. The second movement, Divertissement, my favorite, is a small collection of lovely melodies, gracious and uncomplicated. Jeu, the third movement, is for violin and clarinet alone. With its frolicking mood, it perfectly depicts the definition, a playful game. The final and longest movement starts in a grand yet pensive style, then transitions to an easygoing dance. We've had a lot of fun putting this piece together, and I'm sure you're going to have fun with it too.
Thank you so much for coming. I was a little bit overwhelmed to see how many people came today. I want to introduce the next coming concerts. Next month, March, we have a cello solo concert, and he's one of the Stella Trio who annually come and perform. And then I run another concert series in San Francisco, and then he had a solo recital there last year, and he got standing ovation. It's just amazing talent, and I'm thrilled to bring him here for cello solo recital. And then April, we're gonna have Easter concert, and we open this wonderful opportunity to anyone who's interested in singing with us. So you don't have to come Sunday, you just come on Thursday and then rehearse with us, and then you can sing for the concert. We'll sing a lot of good songs by great composers like Dan Forrest and Mary McDonald, and also we'll sing God So Loved the World by Steiner, and then hopefully a cappella, and we'll sing Lord's Prayer, and we'll finish with Messiah Hallelujah. So if you're interested in, we meet here every Thursday, 7 o'clock, and just let me know, and I will give you all the music and all the recordings you can practice by yourself, and then we can have fun. And then we have refreshment in the fireside room over there. We have tiramisu cheesecake, and I don't know how many of you can have it, but just run there and then grab before it goes away. Thank you so much. And another applause for. Thank you.